In this lesson, we're going to learn how to add reference images to our 3ds Max scene. Alright, so in 3ds Max, there are a couple of different ways that we can add reference images to our scene. So the first way that we could use is by actually adding a viewport background to a front, top, left view. And this can be done by simply going to the front view, in this case, and we can go to Views, Viewport Background, and then we configure Viewport Background. Now by doing this, what we can do is we can tell it to actually add an image to our background. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a file, a bitmap to use, and then we're going to tell it what file to actually use. So click on Files, and this should bring up your Images folder of your project folder, and we're going to use this VTOL profile because this is the aircraft that we're going to be creating here, and we're going to hit Open. Now once you have added that, you need to have Lock Zoom Pan turned on here. Now if this is not turned on, you need to make sure that you have Match Bitmap selected. Okay, so that make sure that that is checked. Alright, now once that has been checked, we want to apply to the active view, and then we'll hit OK. Now if we zoom out here, you'll see that our image has been applied to our background, and we are able to pan around, and it stays in its relative position, and we can zoom out and zoom in on it. Now we could begin to model here, but there are a couple of issues that we have with this method. We would have to stick to the method of working in our front, top, and left, and then only inspecting in our perspective view, because you can see here that the image does not show up. Now if I were to hit Alt and W to maximize this viewport, which we will use while modeling, we are not able to switch to the left view because you'll see that that front image, or that viewport background, is tied to our left view as well, and it's not really tied to it. Let's hit Alt and W and let's see what's actually happening here. What you'll see is we've only changed this one viewport to the left. So if we hit F to go to the front, you'll see that that viewport updates automatically here. And the problem that we have with that is that we want to be able to use the front and top for a top-down reference image, but we want to be able to have a maximized viewport. So a way to get around this is to get rid of that viewport background, and I'm going to go ahead and configure that. Let's remove that, apply to active, and hit OK. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a plane, and I'm just going to drag one in. It doesn't matter the size just yet, and I'm going to resize it to 200 by 200. I'm going to go ahead and center this plane by grabbing my Move tool, and I'm going to type in 0, 0, and 0 on this, so that way the center of this reference image is directly centered in my scene on the origin. And then I'm going to go to my Modify panel with this plane selected, and I'm going to drag the length and width segments down to 1 by 1. Okay, just so that way it's a single polygon. Alright, so now that we have this polygon here, let's go ahead and apply an image to it. And we have to do this with materials. Now you'll see that we have some materials that carried over from previous lessons, but that's not a big issue. We can always select those, and we could switch those back to standard materials. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. But we're going to go ahead and select this first material, and then I'm going to apply a map to it. And I'm going to go down to my Maps section here, and I'm going to expand that, and we're going to go to the Diffuse Color and click on None. If you go to Bitmap, you can apply whichever image you need. So in this case, we're going to apply our profile. I'm going to hit Open on that, and then I'm going to assign that material to my plane. And then I need to make sure that I hit this Show Shaded Material in Viewport. That's going to allow me to see my image in the viewport itself. Now you'll notice that in the front view we're not able to see that image because our wireframe render mode is turned on. So let's go ahead and turn that off by left clicking on it and going to shaded. If we hit G on the keyboard, we can get rid of that grid and we can see our image a little bit easier. Alright, there we go. Okay, so now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and get our profile image, or I'm sorry, our top image of our reference image. So let's go ahead and use another slot here. And I know that you could use a multi-sub-object material, but we're not going to get into that just yet. Let's just use a separate material slot. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're on standard. Now instead of going down to maps and then clicking on none next to the diffuse color, what we could do is we could hit this bitmap shortcut next to diffuse and do that same thing. So let's go to bitmap and then let's use top. Alright, now we don't have anything to assign this to just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy of this plane and rotate it to where it is facing upward. So let's grab our rotate tool, and then I also want to turn on my angle snapping. This is going to allow me to rotate to a specific degree. So if I hold down shift, I can clone an object. So if you remember how to do that, so hold shift and rotate in the X direction, and we're going to rotate that 90 degrees. And there you can see that snap there in that number. Okay, and then I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm not going to make this an instance. Let's make it a copy, and we'll hit OK. Now that has copied over the material as well. So let's go ahead and apply our new material to that, and then show shaded in viewport, and there we go. Let's go ahead and close our materials, and in my top view I'm going to hit F3 to go to realistic. But remember, if we go to realistic, it's going to have these shadows on there. We don't want that, so I'm going to go to shaded view. There we go. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to separate these reference images so I can actually see the plane as I'm modeling. So let's grab the front plane and let's go to our selected move tool, and I'm just going to move this back, and let's go to something around, I believe that looks like 100 maybe. Well, it's 70 here. Let's go ahead and go back to the edge of this plane here. So we'll type in 100 on the Y, and then we're going to type in, I believe it's -50 or -100 on the Z. Now you don't have to do this exactly. It's just a way for me to keep things nice and clean. Now one thing that I want you to notice is it hasn't changed anything in the front view or in the top view, because we have moved those reference images in a direction that will show no change in these orthographic views. So as you can see here in the front view, if I move this in the Y, okay, the Y direction is not showing up in the front view whenever I'm in my perspective view. That's because it's basically the direction that's going into the monitor and out of the monitor. Same thing with the top view here. Okay, so if I select this object, you can see that my Z direction is not there. Okay, and that's because it's coming out of the monitor. So I can move it in my perspective view, and you'll see that there is no change until it gets above the grid. Okay, good. So in our top view, I'm going to hit G, turn off that grid, and I'm also going to do that in my perspective view. Now in my perspective view, I'm going to hit Alt and W. And now I have my reference images ready and set up. And now the final thing that I want to do is I want to freeze these so that way I don't accidentally move them while I'm modeling. So I'm going to select both of these objects, and we're going to right click, and we're going to freeze selection. Now you'll notice that this is turned gray, and this can be an issue because we can no longer see our reference image. So how do we remedy this problem? Well, let's go ahead and right click and unfreeze all, and let's select the top reference image, and I'm going to go ahead and actually rename that. So let's type in top_ref, and then let's type in profile_ref. And with the top ref selected, let's right click and go to Object Properties. This is going to bring up your Object Properties dialog box, and here we have all kinds of different controls over the way it's displayed, how it's rendered, and any lighting options and things like that for the specific object itself. Here I want to deal with the freezing aspect. So if I check this, it's going to freeze this object, and if I hit OK, it's going to go ahead and turn that gray again. So there's something else that is going to be an issue. So let's right click and unfreeze all. Let's select it, right click and go to Object Properties again, but this time let's uncheck this Show Frozen in Gray. And then let's hit freeze and then OK. Now you'll see that I'm no longer able to select this object, and we can still see our reference image. So let's do the same thing for this one. Right click, Object Properties, Show Frozen in Gray, let's uncheck that and then check freeze and then hit OK. So now both of these we are unable to select both of them. So now what we're able to do is we're able to switch to our front view by hitting F, and then we're able to switch to our top view by hitting T, and then we're able to switch to our perspective again by hitting P. And that gives us free reign to switch between all of those views while maximized and still continue to see our reference images. Alright, so in our next lesson we're going to get started by beginning the creation of the actual fuselage of our image or our plane here. Alright, so I'll see you in the next lesson.